Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Aurorin Expounded, where I, G. Blaine Thompson, your humble DM, go over the world building and history of the world of Aurorin. Today I thought it would be kind of fun to do another historical event, and this one is much smaller scale compared to the last one that we covered, but still a pretty significant thing in the world nonetheless. So, we are going to zoom our focus in onto Relendwell, specifically Ruskalia and Alabast. This conflict is one of the biggest wars that has been waged on the continent of Relendwell, aside from the first and second surges from the Blighted Lands. And this war is known as the War of the Mountain Breaker, or Mountain Breaker's War. And with a title like that, what better place to start than with the Mountain Breaker himself? So, let's get into it. Around 250 years prior to the events of the Paragon campaign, a boy was born by the name of Ashkarog. Ashkarog was an orc of mighty stature, born in the northwestern region of Ruskalia, near the area that is currently known as D-Fourtress. Ruskalia was and still is to this day a very savage survival of the fittest style land. And such, Ashkarog had to fight for everything he had. He grew up in a tribe of warriors and hunters that would stalk the badlands of Ruskalia for the massive beasts that roam the area. Growing up, Ashkarog's tribe was constantly under attack by warring neighboring tribes as well as the massive beasts that surrounded the area, developing a powerful bloodlust within the young man. Though every day was a struggle to survive, he enjoyed every minute of it and enjoyed the blood that he had to shed and the feeling of kill or be killed. He spent years honing his strength and skills on the battlefield, killing almost every single foe that came his way, only suffering defeat a few times, but always managing to escape and get his revenge later should he fail. Eventually, as Ashkarog became a fully fledged adult, a new monster appeared within the region, a large earth elemental that could crush entire towns beneath its feet. This monster was named the Walking Disaster by the local tribes, and an alliance was struck between the warring nations to bring the beast down. Ashkarog was not happy with this alliance that his chief had made, and he began to resent his own chieftain because should the alliance work out and all the tribes manage to take down the elemental together, then there wouldn't be any wars left for him to fight, he thought. And so he and a few of his closest allies decided to set out at night before the peace accords could officially begin to hunt down the creature on their own. They were missing for several weeks, but they never were found by search parties. During that time, Ashkarog and his team managed to track the monster down, and leading it through traps and with clever ingenuity and knocking the beast down with several boulder traps, they were able to pick away at its exterior, exposing the crystalline heart within and shattering it, killing the beast. Ashkarog and his party took fragments of the heart and brought it to their chief as a show of strength. However, despite their victory, the chieftain was not pleased with Ashkarog's actions, as it did cost the entire region a chance at peace treaties. Disappointed with his chief's reaction, Ashkarog challenged him to a one-on-one battle, in which Ashkarog snapped his neck. Following this, Ashkarog's tribe became his own, and those defectors were quick to follow in line as he began ruling with an iron fist. And after just a few short months and decisive victory after victory, he managed to conquer all the surrounding tribes, becoming a major warlord within the northern region of Ruskalia. And to cement his role, he and his allies all merged their fragments of the elemental's heart together to form the axe known as the Mountain Breaker, the very weapon that Ashkarog would become to be named after. And thus, the Mountain Breaker was born, and his warpath was just getting started. Ashkarog built what is now known as Interitus in the Blood Ridge Canyons within Ruskalia. And even though these regions change names frequently as new warlords come to power, this one has stuck, as Ashkarog believed himself to be a divine descendant of a god of war. The truth of that is still up in the air. However, taking the name of the Celestials, or taking the language of the Celestials, he named his land Interitus, which is Celestial, or in real world language, Latin for annihilation. And thus began Ashkarog's conquering of Ruskalia. He made his way east first to what is now known as Smolder Hill, and he had a similar strategy for every single one of these takeovers. His closest ally was a man known as Loken, a scrawny and deceitful man who seemed to carry more power than his form would first give away. Loken would infiltrate these tribes and sow seeds of doubt and distrust within their warlords, nearly sparking what is akin to civil wars within them before Ashkarog would march his army on their borders and take them down and slaughter them almost to the man unless they surrendered and joined his army. He and Loken would rage on this warpath, starting first heading east from Interitus to what is now known as Smolder Hill. And once he claimed the head of that first warlord, he then headed southwest to what is now Eagle's Roost and claimed the head of that warlord, and worked his way south to Willowfold first, then what is now Grimfast, and then Bonebreak Ridge. During this time, the neutral zone of Sanctuary had not been founded. That was just empty tribal badlands during that time. Ashkarod's new enchanted axe was said to have created ravines and leveled hills, decimating buildings and sending dozens of men flying with a single swipe of his blade. And meanwhile, Loken had a knack for sowing anarchy behind enemy lines. But eventually, after about a decade of working his way south, conquering tribe after tribe and killing warlord after warlord, he had finally done it. Ruskalia was his. But that wasn't quite enough. Ashkarod's army marched into Alabast, starting from the south, moving east from what is now Bonebreak Ridge. Their first target being the city known as Ashwindale. During this time, Ashwindale was actually the capital of Alabast, as Storasil was currently a relatively small settlement, similar to what Thurndwald is right now. Ashkarod's armies lay siege to Ashwindale for about 3 months until they finally managed to break into the city and render the palace nothing but rubble, killing not only the king but his entire family and what remained of his bloodline as well, leaving no heirs to the throne. With this, victory definitely seemed assured for the rest of Alabast. During this siege, however, Loken was set up north to, instead of going through the southern border, was sent through Iron Root Pass to start sowing seeds of chaos within Thurndwald and the northern cities and settlements to basically destabilize it by the time Ashkarod can make his way round up to them. However, receiving that mission was the very last time Loken and Ashkarod would ever meet, as Loken would fall to a mysterious adventurer. Loken would eventually be taken in by the god of anarchy and rebuilding and rebellion, known as Kaor, and given the title Angel of Anarchy, and would be used in the rebellion, in the very recent rebellion within the Phaelandi Empire, until he escaped the god's influence to go and wreak havoc on his own again. But That's a story for another time. But confident in his own strength, Ashkarog still set about north, feeling that he could conquer anything that would be thrown his way. He made his way around the eastern side of Blackbrim Mountain, decimating towns and villages all along his way until he nearly wiped Cliff Town off of the map. And then he finally made it to the settlement of Storasil. And little did he know, there was somebody waiting for him. Elisana Sunrunner was an elf woman from the west, born and raised within the country known as Valdish, on the continent of Mistcalled far to the west. She was raised as a mage, but also studied the blade in her formative years. Combining these two skills together made her a force to be reckoned with, mastering the art of blade singing at a very young age, but focusing more on the martial prowess side of things, using magic to enhance her body and strikes. She had set out on her own to explore and see what the world held for her, basically becoming an adventurer in her own right, taking jobs as she traveled from west to east, making her way through Duskenweald until finally she got on a boat and docked within Hirashal. Concerned about the current war, she decided to investigate herself, going to the southwestern edge of Hirashal into Ruskalia, sneaking her way through to kind of gauge what was going on. Even over a decade later, the original signs of war of when Ashkarog first began his conquering campaign, all the evidence was still there that she could see plain as day. Skeletons littering the battlefield, craters within the ground, and broken towns and weapons lay scattered across the entire Badlands. Eventually, she made her way to Ironroot Pass, coming up on a town known as Thurndwald, which seemed to be under threat of some outsiders that seemed to be sowing dissent. Elisana helped the local law enforcement investigate these outsiders, and when they were eventually ousted to be soldiers working under the command of Ashkarog, a fight ensued. With local law enforcement, Elisana was able to defeat these dissenters, leaving her alone in a duel against Loken, to which she would ultimately prove victorious. And with this victory, she decided to head east to Storasil and wait for the man himself to arrive. Elisana was followed by some of these soldiers from Thurndwall to help reinforce the settlement of Storasil. And during her time there, she actually managed to train up a militia as well as send people up north to recruit help all the way up from Hirashal, until finally, over the southern horizon, from the Saltlands from the south, the Mountain Breaker's army arrived. There was a tense stillness in the air as both of the armies stared each other down. Almost a day passed with no activity, until the first of the skirmishers from the Mountain Breaker's army were deployed. With the masterful archers hailing from Hirashal, they were able to hold the line and keep the force at large from entering the settlement. However, a few didn't make it past, but met a swift end by an unseen hand. The army within Storasil is currently being commanded by a man known as General Gwenwick Arbinger. Gwenwick, a veteran dwarf, was able to hold the line, but the main thing he knew he had to have was patience. At least patience to outlast that of the Mountain Breaker. The armies knew that the Mountain Breaker had an insatiable bloodlust, and if they could hold the stalemate for long enough, he would come to the front line himself to satisfy that bloodlust. And eventually, of what was about 3 days of what could best be considered a stalemate, Ashkarog himself finally stepped out, ready to crush this settlement beneath his boot and be rid of this annoyance once and for all. As Ashkarog stepped out, his soldiers gave him a wide area to work with, knowing that if they were to step in his way, they would not be spared his wrath. But instead of a small army approaching him trying to surround him, he found himself in a duel as a lone woman approached. This woman, wreathed in silver armor, with a long, curved, thin sword, stared him down from across no man's land. And then they rushed each other, and their blades clashed. Ashkarog was by far more physically powerful. However, Elisana was much faster. Ashkarog, bringing his blade down overhead, cleaved crevices into the rock beneath them. However, Elisana was quick to sidestep it. During these dodges and weaves, she could only get in small cuts, not enough to bring down this behemoth of a man. Even backing off and firing off magic from a distance did not seem to hinder Ashkarog very much, as he seemed to just eat the power from it. Elisana knew that she had to make one decisive killing blow. Otherwise, this man would keep raging on and wouldn't fall to anything small. He was a force of sheer rage, bloodlust, and willpower, and she knew that she had to match that. He was an immovable object, so she decided to become an unstoppable force. Hours upon clashing blades and glancing blows, finally Elisana charged him head-on. Ashkarog braced himself, raising his axe in a ready position as she charged, waiting for her to step to the side or weave around yet again. However, she didn't do that. He brought the axe up and down over her, and she stepped, and he braced himself for the step, but she only stepped a little bit. As he brought his axe down, it cleaved into her shoulder, severing her left arm, her main sword arm, leaving her sword flying through the air and her arm severed on the ground next to her. However, she kept charging. With her free right hand, she caught her sword by the blade, cutting her hand just a little bit, but managed to get in close to an unprepared Ashkarog and ran the blade through his throat and out the back of his skull. And with that, the axe fell to the ground, partially breaking along with its master's death. As Elisana lost consciousness, the armies of Ruskalia saw the fall of their leader and decided to retreat. But being privy to this survival of the fittest, before they could mount a counterattack, the army would eat itself alive as it slowly migrated back to Ruskalia. And thus, the Mountain Breakers' war came to an end, leaving Ruskalia divided and still warring amongst itself for the next couple centuries, and Elisana to be rescued from her wounds, healed, and eventually take command of all of Alabast. An nearly unanimous decision by the people to instate her as their new queen. And while she is not one for politics, she did accept the responsibility to protect the people of this country, and still does to this day. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you so much as well for being patient with me as I've been dealing with some health stuff, both mental and physical. I do know camera looks weird. I have like weird redness in my cheek creases, and like green skin looks weird. Always constantly improving and things like that. Nonetheless, I appreciate you all watching this. Be sure to support us on Patreon, as you get some really cool benefits for doing so, such as shoutouts. And speaking of which, thank you to D4Fan for making this video possible. Always appreciative of that. And keep your eye out. We have some more projects coming down the line. I've been thinking of something else to do with storytelling in the world of Aurorin that it's going to be super experimental. So I've got to work some tweets out. So I don't know when that's coming out, but keep your eye out for that. And also, But yeah, thank you all so much for your support. And if you want to hear about anything specific within the world of Aurorin that might deserve its own video, go ahead and leave any suggestions you want to give down in the comments. I'd love to read through those. But anyway, my name is G. Blaine Thompson. This has been Aurorin Expounded. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all later. Bye-bye.